Zedric Cal always thought a Tuesday morning couldn't get worse than stepping in dog crap on his way to work. Turns out, he was very, very wrong. He stood in the middle of New York's digital replica, staring at the sky, or rather, the flickering holographic ceiling that passed for it in this lovely alien zoo. If I wanted to be someone's science experiment, I'd have stayed in school, Zed muttered, kicking a pebble that skittered across the asphalt, leaving behind a pixelated trail. He was alone, apart from the usual crowd of NPC mimicking life like they had any choice in the matter. The Vexari, alien bastards with a penchant for treating Earth like their own low-budget Jurassic Park, had trapped humanity in a simulation. The real Earth was probably gathering dust somewhere, like an old action figure forgotten under a nerd's bed. Not that Zed was bitter. Nah, he just liked complaining as much as the next guy who realized his entire existence was a cosmic joke. A man in a cheap suit stumbled past, eyes glazed, a familiar sight. "Morning, Zed," the man droned, voice devoid of real life, like a morning talk show with the soul sucked out. "Morning, Jeff. Pretending to care about your job again today." Zed quipped back, but Jeff was already walking away, his brain too fried and scrambled by the Vexari tech to appreciate sarcasm. The Vexari weren't content with just playing zookeepers. Oh no. They'd started infecting humans with goddamn parasites, because why not add a little body horror to the apocalypse? These parasites were supposed to give humans abilities, but the catch was you had about a 50-50 chance of ending up as mulch. Zed's friend, Rickon, had been one of the lucky or unlucky ones. He'd gotten super strength but couldn't open a jar of pickles without accidentally reducing it to a glass and vinegar massacre. "Hey, Zed!" Rickon's voice boomed from across the street as he bounded over with the grace of a drunk elephant. He nearly took out a street vendor's cart, sending holographic apples rolling everywhere. "Cool it, Hulk," Zed called. "You're gonna cause a scene, and I hate scenes." Rickon stopped short, looking sheepish. "Sorry, still getting used to not crushing everything I touch." "Yeah, it's a real tragedy," Zed deadpanned. "How's the parasite? Apart from making me feel like I just ate a truckload of chili peppers raw, it's fine," Rickon shrugged. "Better than the alternative." Zed nodded, remembering the alternative vividly. He'd seen enough people crumble under the parasites, reduced to gibbering wrecks or worse. "Yeah, well, you've got a one-up on the rest of us, I suppose." "You say that like it's a good thing," Rickon laughed, though there was a nervous edge to it, like a man laughing at his own bad joke before realizing it was a premonition. They walked along the city streets, surrounded by a world that was both familiar and utterly fake. Zed could never shake the feeling that they were all just characters in a cosmic sitcom playing in some alien teenager's room. The pair ducked into a dingy bar, one of Zed's favorite haunts. It had the distinct advantage of real alcohol, smuggled in from who knows where by someone with either guts, a death wish, or both. The bartender, a scarred woman named Tasha, grunted a greeting. "You two look like hell," she said, pouring them each a drink. "Thanks, that's the look I was going for," Zed replied, taking a sip. "How's business?" "Booming, like always," Tasha said with a sardonic grin. "People drink when they're trapped in a simulation." Who knew? They settled into their drinks, the conversation ebbing and flowing with the kind of dark humor that came naturally when you were living on borrowed time in a fake world. "So what's the plan, Zed?" Rickon asked, one eye on the door, the other on his drink. "Plan? Does it look like I've got a plan? I'm just trying to make it through another day without losing my mind or becoming a parasite buffet," Zed replied. Rickon snorted. "That's optimistic. And here I thought I was the pessimist," Zed chuckled. "Look, we can't do much about the Vexari. They're out there in the real world and we're stuck playing house in their twisted version of The Sims." As if summoned by their conversation, a harsh, electronic buzzing filled the air, a warning that a Vexari patrol was nearby. Everyone in the bar froze, the collective hold-your-breath moment that had become all too familiar. "Here we go," Tasha muttered, ducking behind the bar. Zed and Rickon crouched low, trying to make themselves as small as possible. Not that it would help much if the Vexari decided to do a sweep. They had a way of seeing through walls and hope. The buzzing intensified, then passed, leaving a trail of relieved exhalations in its wake. "Well, that was fun," Zed said, straightening up. "A real thrill ride," Rickon agreed. "Think they know we're plotting their downfall? If they did, we'd probably be dead," Zed pointed out, finishing his drink in one long gulp. The bar's door swung open and a wiry figure slipped inside. "Zed," said the newcomer, a woman with sharp eyes and the kind of smile that spelled trouble. "Celeste," Zed greeted her with a nod. "Haven't seen you since that incident." "Yeah, sorry about that," Celeste shrugged, unapologetic. "Had to lay low after that last heist." "Heist? You mean that catastrophe that nearly got us all killed?" Rickon interjected. "Tomato, tomato," Celeste waved a hand dismissively. "Besides, I've got something that'll make up for it." Zed raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she leaned in, lowering her voice. "There's a way out." "Bull," Zed replied instantly. "There's no way out." "No, really," Celeste insisted. "I got a line on something big, something the Vexari don't want us to know about." "And you found this out how?" Celeste just smiled that infuriating smile. "Let's just say I have my ways." Zed exchanged a look with Rickon. It was the kind of look that said we shouldn't trust her, but what if she's right? Besides, hope was in short supply, so when someone dangled even a tiny bit in front of you, it was hard not to take a bite. "Fine," Zed said slowly. "Let's hear it." And so Celeste spun her tale, weaving a story about hidden codes, rogue AI, and a Vexari scientist who'd gone rogue. It was a story that sounded more like science fiction than the grim reality they were stuck in. Yet there was something in her eyes that made Zed want to believe. "So," he said when she finally finished. "What's the catch?" "The catch is," Celeste said, leaning back with a grin, "we have to break into the Vexari central hub." "Of course we do," Rickon groaned, rubbing his temples. "Why does it always come down to breaking and entering?" "Because it's the only way to get anything done around here," Celeste replied. "You in?" Zed looked at Rickon, then back at Celeste. The odds were crap, the plan half-baked, and the risk about as high as they'd ever faced. But what was the alternative? "Yeah," Zed finally said. "We're in." And with that, they sealed their fate with a handshake, a token gesture in a world where virtual handshakes carried more weight than the real thing. They spent the rest of the day planning, which mostly involved Rickon trying not to crush anything and Zed wondering if he'd finally lost his last marble. Tasha provided drinks and commentary, her laughter punctuating their increasingly ridiculous strategies. "You're gonna get yourselves killed," she said at one point, but her voice held a note of admiration. "But hell, why not go out with a bang, right?" As night fell, the city took on a different tone, the neon lights casting a sickly glow over the streets. Zed found himself staring at the skyline, wondering what the real Earth looked like these days. Did it even exist, or was it just a distant memory like a dream fading upon waking? "Penny for your thoughts?" Rickon asked, joining him on the bar's rooftop. "Just wondering if this is all there is," Zed admitted. "And if we're crazy for trying to change it." "Probably," Rickon said with a grin. "But think of the alternative." Zed nodded. "Yeah, I suppose rotting away in a digital cage isn't my idea of a good time." "Exactly," Rickon said, clapping him on the back with a force that nearly sent him over the edge. "Now come on, we've got work to do." And so, under the flickering sky of their digital prison, they prepared to take on the Vexari. It was a long shot, a plan hatched by desperate minds in desperate times, but it was a chance all the same. The next morning they gathered at the agreed-upon spot, each carrying the weight of their decision like a second skin. Celeste was already there, her expression unreadable, though her eyes sparkled with a mischievous light. "Ready?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. "As ready as I'll ever be," Zed replied, hoping his voice didn't betray the nervousness coiling in his gut. "Let's do this," Rickon said, cracking his knuckles with a sound like distant thunder. And with that they set out into the unknown, a ragtag band of humans against the cosmic odds. Whether they'd succeed or not was anyone's guess, but at least they were doing something. In a world where everything was scripted, they were trying to write their own ending. As they approached the Vexari hub, Zed couldn't help but think of an old Earth saying, "Fortune favors the bold." Well, if that was true, hopefully, Fortune wouldn't mind giving them a hand, because they were going to need all the help they could get. And with that thought, they plunged forward into the belly of the beast. The morning after was the kind that made you question all your life choices. Zed, Rickon, and Celeste stood in the neon glow of a street that wasn't really a street, at a time that wasn't really morning. Time was weird here. Like trying to remember the days when weekends meant something other than just another way to mark the endless purgatory loop. "Myra Vantor's gonna love this plan," Celeste quipped, her grin sharper than a shard of broken hope. "Who's Myra Vantor?" Zed asked. "Only the best shot we've got at making it out of this digital hamster wheel," Celeste replied. "She leads the Rebels." "Rebels? Real original." "Let me guess, do they have a catchy slogan like 'Down with the Vexari'?" Rickon asked, rolling his eyes. Sometimes sarcasm was all you had when you were neck-deep in alien crap. "Something like that," Celeste said, leading them through the holographic maze of the city. "Except their slogan's more like 'Please don't kill us, we're just trying to survive.'" "Catchy," Zed muttered. As they navigated the streets, Zed couldn't shake the feeling that every glowing billboard and fake pedestrian might as well have been a Vexari spy. Paranoia was a healthy habit in a place where reality was as flimsy as a politician's promise. They finally arrived at a nondescript building with a sign that read "Used Electronics." Zed half expected to find old Earth tech rusting inside, like iPhones and toasters with half a brain. Celeste knocked in a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like a bad dance beat. The door opened a crack, revealing a pair of eyes. "Celeste," the owner of the eyes grumbled. "Back so soon?" "Yeah, we're here for the full tour this time," she replied. The door swung open, revealing a man with a face like a crumpled paper bag. "Welcome to the Make It Out Alive Club," he said dryly. "I'm Jax." Zed and Rickon exchanged glances, then stepped inside. The place was dimly lit, like a noir film set, and smelled vaguely of desperation and burnt coffee. A handful of people milled about, all wearing the universal expression of "I'd rather be anywhere but here." Myra Vantor was easy to spot. She sat at a table covered in maps and datapads, her presence commanding attention despite her petite frame. She had short hair, a no-nonsense gaze, and the kind of confidence that either got you killed or crowned king in a world like this. "Celeste," she greeted with a nod, then turned her attention to Zed and Rickon. "These the ones you mentioned?" "Yep," Celeste confirmed. "Zed, Rickon, meet Myra. She's the brains behind this operation." Myra sized them up like a butcher checking the quality of meat. "You look like you've seen better days." "These are the better days," Zed replied, trying to match her intensity with a smile that was more grimace than grin. "Yeah, well, it's about to get worse," Myra said, gesturing for them to sit. "We're planning to escape this digital hellhole. If you're with us, you need to know the stakes." "More like stakes through the heart," Rickon murmured. Myra spread a map across the table, dotted with red marks that looked ominously like bloodstains in the dim light. "The Vexari have a way out, but it's heavily guarded and booby-trapped with tech that can fry your brain faster than you can say bad idea." "Sounds delightful," Zed said. "And the plan is, we infiltrate their hub, plant a virus in their mainframe, and use the chaos to slip through unnoticed," Myra explained, her calm voice contrasting sharply with the insanity of her words. Celeste leaned in, her voice conspiratorial. "And there's more. The parasites, they're not just random chaos seeds. They're a control mechanism, a way for the Vexari to experiment with manipulating human abilities. Some get powers like Rickon, others just get dead. So, we're lab rats in a digital maze," Zed summarized. "Great. Lab rats with a shot at freedom," Myra corrected. "We've got just enough data to make it work and just enough recklessness to try it." Zed couldn't help but chuckle. "Well, when you put it like that, how can I resist?" Rickon raised a hand. "Question, What happens if we get caught? Let's just say they don't have a get-out-of-jail-free card on offer, Myra said, her smile thin but genuine. You in? Zed thought about the fake sunrises, the endless streets, the holographic apples rolling underfoot. He thought about a life lived under the watchful eyes of alien overlords who probably saw humanity as little more than a Netflix series. Yeah, he said finally. We're in. Rickon nodded, his expression a mix of determination and sheer insanity. Hell, why not? Worst case scenario, I finally get to see if there's an afterlife. Best case, we get out of this circus. Good, Myra said, a glint of approval in her eyes. Let's get started. They spent the next few hours poring over plans, refining details, trying to outthink a race that had made a sport out of being 10 steps ahead. It was like trying to win chess against a cosmic supercomputer with a penchant for changing the rules every 5 minutes. Zed found himself admiring Myra's determination. She had that rare spark, the kind that made you believe that even in the darkest pit, there might still be a way up. He wondered what her story was, why she fought so hard when most had already accepted their fate. By the time they wrapped up, Zed's head was spinning with details, but the plan seemed almost possible, which was better odds than they'd had in a long time. Myra clapped him on the shoulder. Get some rest, Zed. Big day tomorrow. Yeah, he replied, though sleep felt like a distant possibility, as likely as a Vexari pat on the back. Celeste lingered as the others filtered out. Nice job back there, she said, a rare compliment from someone who gave them out as frequently as the Vexari gave hugs. Thanks, Zed said. You know how to pick your teams. Just remember, Celeste said, her smile returning. If we pull this off, drinks are on you. Zed chuckled. If we pull this off, drinks are on the house. The night passed in fits and starts of uneasy dreams and quick jolts awake, each time expecting the Vexari to come crashing through the door. But morning, or whatever passed for it, came without incident. They regrouped at the rebellion's base, jittery with nerves and coffee that tasted like melted boot leather. Myra was already there, her presence as steadying as it was unnerving. Last chance to back out, she said, scanning the room. No one moved. All right then, she said. Let's go stick it to the Vexari. The journey to the Vexari hub was a blur of tension and whispered jokes meant to stave off the looming dread. They moved through the city like ghosts, sticking to shadows and alleys, feeling the oppressive gaze of the Vexari, yet somehow slipping beneath it. When they reached the hub, they paused, taking in the imposing structure that looked like someone had dropped a futuristic fortress in the middle of a pretend city. It shimmered with the kind of energy that said, "Come closer, I dare you." Looks inviting, Rickon said, cracking his knuckles again. How do we get past the front door? Jax grinned, holding up a small device. With this, scrambles their sensors for a minute. Just long enough for us to slip in. They huddled together, Jax activating the device. A soft hum filled the air, and like a curtain being drawn, the sensors blinked off. Go, Myra hissed, and they moved, darting across the open ground toward the entrance. Heart pounding, Zed felt the adrenaline coursing through him, the thrill of doing something recklessly stupid in the name of freedom. They reached the door, Myra already working the lock with deft fingers that spoke of too many nights picking through digital locks. Got it, she said, and the door slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing the sterile corridors beyond. Inside, the air was cool and artificially scented, a jarring contrast to the outside world. Zed half expected a welcoming committee of Vexari to greet them, but the halls were eerily silent. They moved quickly, following Myra's lead through the labyrinthine passages. Each step felt like a small victory, each turn a gamble. They reached the mainframe room without incident, which Zed found more disconcerting than comforting. Here goes nothing, Myra said, plugging a device into the mainframe console. Lines of code streamed across the screen as she worked, the virus embedding itself into the system. Zed kept watch, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They were in the heart of the beast, poking it with a stick and hoping it wouldn't bite back. Rickon stood beside him, tense but ready. Think we'll pull this off? He asked. Not a clue, Zed admitted. But hey, we've come this far, right? Rickon nodded. Just once I'd like a win. Zed couldn't help but agree. A win felt like a pipe dream, but right now, in this moment, it was a dream they were willing to chase, no matter the cost. The virus finished its work with a soft beep. Done, Myra said, pulling the device free. Now we get out. They retraced their steps, moving faster now, the sense of urgency palpable. The corridors seemed longer, the shadows deeper, as if the Vexari themselves were closing in around them. They reached the exit just as the alarms began to blare, a cacophony of sound that sent adrenaline surging through their veins. Move, move, Myra shouted as they sprinted for freedom. The world outside was chaos, the city alive with the sound of Vexari forces scrambling. But they didn't stop, didn't look back, not until they were far enough away to catch their breath. Panting, Zed looked at Myra, who wore a triumphant grin. "We did it," she said, the words almost disbelieving. "We actually did it," Rickon echoed, laughter bubbling up from somewhere deep within. Zed couldn't help but join in, the laughter a release, a celebration of a victory that seemed impossible just hours before. They had pulled off the impossible, and for the first time the digital city's neon glow didn't feel quite so oppressive. In a world where hope was a scarce commodity, they'd found a way to tip the scales, even if just a little. It was a long shot, this crazy plan of theirs, but sometimes a long shot was all you needed. And as they made their way back to the rebels' base, Zed couldn't help but feel like they were finally writing their own story, one desperate, reckless page at a time. Zedric Cal leaned against the wall of their hideout, the kind of wall that looked like it had seen more than its fair share of failed escape plans and whispered conspiracies. The rebellion's base had all the charm of a rundown motel, but at least the company was good, or at least entertaining. Myra Vantor, in all her rebellious glory, was mid-rant about the Vexari's latest attempt to toy with their digital existence. "Imagine," she was saying, "they trap us in a virtual New York, but they can't even program decent pizza joints. It's a crime against humanity. Not the only crime they've committed," Zed replied, scratching the back of his neck. "But hey, maybe the Vexari just have terrible taste." Rickon, who was lounging on a dilapidated couch that looked like it might give up the ghost any moment, chuckled. "I'd say they've got a taste for chaos. You seen the way they handle traffic lights? It's like they're trying to invent a new sport. Traffic light roulette," Zed mused. "Bet the Vexari think it's hilarious, probably sitting back with popcorn," Myra added, eyes narrowing as she examined a holographic map, lines crisscrossing in a dizzying array of potential escape routes and probable death traps. "But I've got something that might wipe that smug look off their alien faces." She gestured to a small device on the table, a nondescript piece of tech that seemed as likely to explode as it was to do anything helpful. "This," she said, "is a modified version of the parasite tech. We might be able to use it to boost our abilities." Zed raised an eyebrow. "Boost our abilities? Or give us an express ticket to the afterlife?" "A little of column A, a little of column B," Myra admitted. "Look, it's risky. But from what we've gathered, the Vexari use these parasites to test how much humanity can handle. We turn their own game against them." Rickon snorted. "Sure, nothing like playing Russian roulette with alien parasites." "What's the worst that could happen?" Celeste, always the optimist, or perhaps just the least pessimist among them, grinned. "At least if we kick the bucket, we won't have to worry about rent." "Not that rent's a problem," Zed pointed out. "Pretty sure the Vexari's currency is human misery." Jax, their crumpled paper-bag-faced companion, leaned over, peering at the device as if it might bite. "What exactly do we gain if this works?" "Strength, speed, maybe even some telepathic stuff," Myra said, a gleam of excitement mingling with caution in her eyes. "It might be what we need to take the rebellion to the next level." "Or the next level of being extinct," Zed replied, but he couldn't deny the allure of the idea. Anything that might tip the balance even slightly was worth considering. And hell, if they were already living in a giant alien experiment, why not push the boundaries a little more? Testing started off as a disaster or a comedy, depending on how you looked at it. Jax was the first to volunteer, holding the device with the trepidation of a man handling a live grenade. "Just think positive thoughts," Myra said as she flicked a switch. The device hummed to life, a low, unsettling sound that seemed to vibrate through the room. Jax winced, then his eyes widened. I feel like I could punch through a wall." Rickon gave him a skeptical look. "Maybe try punching through something less important first, like our hopes and dreams." Ignoring him, Jax took a tentative swing at the nearest wall. The thud was satisfying, though the wall remained steadfast, and Jax nursed his knuckles with a grimace. "Okay, so maybe not walls." Celeste, watching with a mix of amusement and concern, stepped forward. "Let me try. If it can enhance anything about me, I'd like it to be my tolerance for pain. Specifically, pain from watching you guys mess this up." With a deep breath, she took the device, and Myra activated it again. The room held its collective breath, waiting for Celeste to implode or turn into a superhero. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she grinned. "I think it worked. I just had a vision of the Vexari security layout. It's like a map in my head." "A useful mind map," Zed observed. "That's a new one." Myra nodded, clearly pleased. "It's a start. If we can harness this, we can gather intel faster, strike harder. But we need more data. We need to know how far we can push it. And how far it pushes back," Zed added, ever the realist. They spent countless hours testing, tweaking, and occasionally ducking for cover as the devices did things they weren't supposed to do, like short-circuiting the lights or causing minor explosions. Each experiment seemed like a blend of science fair project and death wish. But amidst the chaos, progress emerged. Myra had gathered the group again for a debrief, her expression one of cautious optimism. "The parasites can be controlled to a degree. It's about tuning into the right frequency like a radio." Rickon, ever the skeptic, leaned back, folding his arms. "Great. So we're all gonna be walking radios." "Just what I always wanted. But it's not without risks," Myra continued, ignoring Rickon's sarcasm. "The more we use these abilities, the more chance we have of tipping the Vexari off. They'll know we're up to something." Zed considered this. "So our best bet is to be one step ahead without tripping over our own feet." "Exactly," Myra said. "And we can't rely on the tech alone. We need to be smart about this. Use our brains as much as our new enhancements," Rickon huffed. "Brains, huh? That's asking a lot." "Speak for yourself," Celeste shot back. "My brain's a finely tuned machine. If it wasn't, I'd be dead by now." Zed chuckled, though the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. They were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. But they had something they hadn't had before, a fighting chance. As the days turned to weeks, the rebels began to see results. Enhanced strength, heightened perception, even limited telepathy. Myra was like a kid in a candy store, her excitement palpable as she documented every success and failure. If the Vexari were watching, and they almost certainly were, this would either prove to be the greatest act of rebellion or a spectacularly disastrous one. They trained relentlessly, honing their new skills, each ability a small spark in the darkness of their digital prison. The rebels were a ragtag bunch, but they were becoming something more, something formidable. But with power came complications. The more they used the parasites, the more they felt the Vexari's presence. It was as if the aliens were watching, waiting for them to slip up. Paranoia became as common as caffeine, and the rebels were jittery with both. One night, as the group sat around a flickering screen that served as their only connection to the outside, or whatever passed for outside, Myra shared the latest development. "We've started getting feedback from the Vexari systems. They know we're up to something." Zed wasn't surprised. "I'm sure they've known for a while. Just biding their time." Rickon leaned forward, a rare serious look on his face. "So what's the plan? Keep pushing until they push back harder." "We need to be ready," Myra said, her voice steady. "If they come for us, we have to hit them first." "Hard, preemptive strike?" Zed asked. "Bold move, it's that or wait for them to start picking us off," Myra replied, her expression grim. "I'd rather go down swinging." the group murmured in agreement, the weight of their decision settling over them like a dark cloud. It was a gamble, a high-stakes poker game where the cards were stacked against them, but at least they were playing. Over the next few days, tensions escalated. The Vexari presence in the digital city seemed to grow, subtle but undeniable. It was like being under a magnifying glass, every move scrutinized. Then came the incident, one of their own, a young recruit eager to prove himself pushed his abilities too far. The feedback was immediate, a searing pain that left him gasping on the floor. "Too much," Myra said, kneeling beside him, her expression a mix of frustration and fear. "We're going to have to scale back." Zed nodded, running a hand through his hair. "We're playing with fire and it's only a matter of time before we get burned." Rickon was less tactful, "or we just get fried like him." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," the recruit muttered, wincing as he sat up. "I'm fine, just went a bit overboard." "Understatement of the year," Celeste said, but there was no malice in her voice, just concern. "We need to be careful. If the Vexari catch wind of this, it's over." The incident served as a wake-up call. They were tampering with forces they barely understood, forces that could turn on them at any moment. But even with this newfound caution, the rebels couldn't stop. They were too far in, the promise of freedom too tantalizing to ignore. Zed found himself in a quiet corner with Myra that night, both of them watching the flickering lights of the digital city outside their window. "Think we're in over our heads?" he asked, breaking the silence. Myra shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Probably. But if we don't try, then what's the point?" he nodded, appreciating her resolve even if it bordered on reckless. "Then let's make sure we make it worth it." "Agreed," she said, her gaze meeting his. "Here's to doing something incredibly stupid, Zed," he laughed softly. "Cheers to that." The night stretched on, the city a quiet hum around them, and for the first time in a long while, Zed felt a flicker of hope. A slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. If they were going to gamble with their lives, they might as well bet everything. And in the end, maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to win. The Vexari, it seemed, had decided to stop pussyfooting around. Their presence in the digital city felt like a vice tightening around the rebels' necks. Surveillance drones buzzed like angry hornets through the neon streets, and every corner seemed to whisper secrets back to their alien overlords. If they had ever had the luxury of time, it was now officially out the window. Zedric Cal sat at a table in the hideout, a place that, on a good day, looked like a fallout shelter designed by someone with a grudge against interior design. Leaning over a holographic map that flickered uncertainly, he glanced up at Myra Vantor, whose enthusiasm for planning assaults was second only to her disdain for staying alive. "Looks like the Vexari decided to up their game," Zed said, tracing the path of a drone on the map with one finger. "Guess they don't appreciate our little science experiments." "I can't imagine why," Myra replied, a sardonic twist to her lips. "It's not like we're doing anything more dangerous than a little recreational terrorism." Rickon, lounging in a chair that seemed to be on the brink of collapse, chuckled. "Yeah, I'm sure they're just jealous they didn't think of turning themselves into science projects first. They're tightening the net," Zed continued, ignoring Rickon's quip. "If we don't find a way to hit them where it hurts, this whole rebellion's gonna be shorter than a Vexari's sense of humor." "Assuming they have one," Myra added. "Which I doubt." "Right," Zed said, tapping the map. "So we need a plan. And not just any plan. A stupid, reckless, probably get-us-all-killed plan." Myra's eyes sparkled with the kind of reckless excitement that Zed couldn't decide was endearing or terrifying. "I've got just the thing." She flicked a switch, and the map zoomed in on a building in the heart of the alien-controlled zone. The Vexari's main hub. All their tech, their precious data, it's all centralized here. Rickon let out a low whistle. "You're suggesting we walk into the lion's den, poke it with a stick, and hope for the best, roughly?" "Yeah," Myra replied with a grin. "Fantastic," Zed said dryly. "When do we start?" "Tonight," Myra said, her expression turning serious. "We can't afford to wait. Every second we waste is another chance for them to find us." Celeste, who'd been listening from the sidelines, stepped forward. Assuming we actually get to this hub, what's the end game? Just blowing it sky high, not just blowing it sky high, Myra corrected. Hijacking their tech. If we can get into their systems, we can turn their own surveillance against them. Imagine knowing their every move before they make it. Zed nodded slowly, the weight of the plan settling in. It's risky. It's the only shot we've got, Myra replied. Unless you've got a better idea, Zed didn't. He never did when it came to Myra's plans. They were often insane, but they were also the only reason any of them were still breathing. Rickon let out a long sigh. Well, I've always fancied myself something of a hacker. Can't be too different from breaking into my old school records, Celeste laughed. I doubt the aliens are recording your high scores on Space Invaders, Rickon. Hey, a man can dream, he shot back. Jax, who'd been sitting silently to the side, spoke up, his voice a gravelly rumble. If we're doing this, we better not half-ass it. I want all of us coming out the other side, agreed, Zed said, though the odds were stacked higher than an intergalactic eating contest. Let's get to work. The group dispersed, each member taking on their part of the plan. Zed found himself back at the flickering map, the digital city stretching out before him like some twisted playground. A place designed to keep them trapped, but also maybe, just maybe, the place where they'd find their freedom. The hours ticked by, the hideout buzzing with activity. Zed went over the details with Myra a dozen times, each iteration scarier than the last. If they pulled this off, they'd be legends. If they didn't, well, at least they wouldn't live long enough to regret it. As the neon lights of the fake city dimmed to a faux night, their ragtag crew gathered near the entrance, each looking more determined than they had any right to be. Remember, Myra said, her voice cutting through the tense silence, we're in and out. No heroics. Rickon snorted, speak for yourself. I've always wanted to be a hero. Just never got the opportunity. You get yourself killed, and I'll be sure to tell everyone you were very brave, Celeste said, giving him a playful shove. Touching, Rickon replied. I'll make sure to leave a handsome corpse. Enough chatter, Zed interrupted, though he couldn't suppress a grin. Let's go make history, or at least make a hell of a mess trying. They moved out, slipping into the shadows of the city, each carrying the weight of their own fears and hopes. As they approached the Vexari hub, the reality of their situation hit Zed like a punch to the gut. This was either the most brilliant thing they'd ever done or the most suicidal. The building loomed before them, a monolith of alien architecture that seemed to pulse with an eerie glow. The rebels spread out, each taking up their positions. Zed and Myra led the charge, their steps calculated and silent. Rickon, you're on lookout. Celeste, Jax, you're with me and Myra, Zed instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. Let's move. The first gate was a challenge, a digital lock that hummed with alien energy. Myra set to work, her fingers flying over the controls with practiced ease. The gate clicked open, a soft hiss of air escaping as it slid aside. Piece of cake, Myra murmured, though her eyes betrayed the tension beneath. Don't get cocky, Zed warned. We're just getting started. Inside, the corridors twisted like a labyrinth, each turn a potential trap. The Vexari didn't do things by halves, and their security was no exception. Drones hovered overhead, scanning for any sign of intrusion. Jax took point, his crumpled face set in grim determination. I always hated playing hide and seek as a kid. Guess I need the practice. Think of it as a new form of cardio, Celeste whispered, her tone light despite the circumstances. They approached the central chamber, the heart of the Vexari operation. The doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a room filled with consoles and blinking lights. Zed's heart raced. This was it, their moment of truth. Myra moved to the nearest console, her fingers dancing across the keys. Keep an eye out. This might take a minute. A minute we might not have. Rickon's voice crackled over their earpieces, his tone tense. We've got company. Looks like a patrol, Zed cursed under his breath. Stall them. Do whatever you have to. Got it, Rickon replied, the line going silent. Myra worked faster, her brow furrowed in concentration. The room seemed to pulse with a life of its own. the alien technology almost taunting them with its complexity. "Hurry up, Myra," Jax urged, glancing nervously at the door. "I'm going as fast as I can," she shot back, her focus unwavering. Zed watched the readouts on the screen, the alien symbols gibberish to him but somehow making perfect sense to Myra. He had to admire her brilliance even if it was likely to get them all killed. Finally, she let out a triumphant noise. "Got it. We're in." The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Zed moved to her side, peering at the data scrolling across the screen. "Can you do it?" "Already working on it," she replied, her fingers a blur. Outside, the sound of footsteps echoed, the patrol closing in. Rickon's voice crackled through again. "They're almost on top of us. Any day now would be great." "Just a little longer," Myra murmured, her eyes never leaving the screen. Zed's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The culmination of their hopes and fears. If they could pull this off, they'd turn the tide. If not, well, he tried not to think about that. The door slid open, revealing a group of HFY soldiers, their eyes glowing with a cold, unearthly light. Time seemed to slow, the threat of discovery hanging in the air like a loaded gun. "Now!" Myra shouted, her voice breaking the tension. Zed acted without thinking, launching himself at the nearest console. The room erupted in chaos, alarms blaring as the HFY surged forward. The rebels fought with a desperation born of knowing there was no turning back. Zed fired at the approaching soldiers, each shot a prayer that they'd live to see another day. Myra continued her work, oblivious to the chaos around her. The HFY were relentless, their advance like a tide threatening to drown them. "Got it!" Myra cried, her voice triumphant. Zed didn't hesitate, fall back. Now, the rebels retreated, fighting their way back through the labyrinthine corridors. The hub came to life, lights flickering as Myra's virus took hold, the alien systems turning against their creators. As they burst out into the night, Zed felt a rush of exhilaration. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd struck a blow against the HFY, but the fight was far from over. The city was alive with the sound of alarms, the HFY regrouping for a counterattack. The rebels ran, their victory bittersweet as they vanished into the shadows once more. Back at the hideout, they collapsed in a heap of exhausted limbs and adrenaline. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and fear, but beneath it all was something else. Hope. "You're insane," Zed said to Myra, unable to keep the grin from his face. "Maybe," she replied, her eyes bright with triumph, "but at least we're all still here." Rickon chuckled, slumping against the wall. "Barely. I'd say we just pissed off the only thing holding this simulation together." "Good," Celeste said, her smile fierce. "Let them sweat for a change." Jax nodded, his crumpled face reflecting the hard-earned satisfaction of a job well done. "We did it. We actually did it." Zed let out a long breath, the tension of the night finally releasing its hold. They'd scored a victory, but it was only the beginning. The HFY were bound to retaliate, their grip tightening in response. But for now, they'd savor their win, knowing they'd made the first move in a game that was far from over. "Here's to doing something incredibly stupid," Zed said, echoing Myra's earlier words. He raised an imaginary glass to his lips, the others following suit. "To incredibly stupid things," Myra agreed, her grin infectious. "To living to tell the tale," Rickon added. "To making history," Celeste said, her voice bright with possibility. And as they sat there, worn out but victorious, Zed couldn't help but hope that this was just the start of something bigger, something that might actually lead them to freedom. The digital city hummed like an angry beast, the HFY's retaliation shaking its very foundations. The rebels had made their mark, sure, but now it felt like poking a hornet's nest with a stick. All the bright lights and holograms couldn't mask the fact that they were knee-deep in alien trouble. Zedric Cal leaned against the flickering console, the weight of his decisions pressing down harder than Jeff's cheap suit after a banquet. "Well, guess we really stirred the pot this time," Rickon quipped, adjusting his jacket like he was headed to a formal event rather than the brink of annihilation. "More like we kicked it off the table," Zed muttered, watching the holographic map rewrite itself with red lines. Each one signaled another patrol, another threat, another reason to regret every life choice he'd made up to this point. Celeste grinned, her face a study in determined mischief. Hey, at least we proved one thing. We can make their tech dance to our tune. Until the music stops and we're left holding the mic, Jax interjected, fixing them with his crumpled paper bag stare that somehow managed to carry the weight of 1,000 resigned sighs. Enough bromance, back to reality, Myra Vantor chimed in, her enthusiasm bordering on the manic. We need to regroup and reassess, or whatever military jargon they use in the movies. Zed nodded, trying to balance hope with the realism of their situation. They were in deep and the water was only rising. All right, let's do a head count of options. Go. Option 1, Rickon started, ticking off his fingers. We hide and hope they forget about us. Unlikely, Celeste countered. These guys have a memory like my mother-in-law. Option 2, Jax said. We try to disable their surveillance again. Might as well juggle plasma grenades for all the good it'll do. And option 3, Zed asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it out loud for some self-destructive reason. Option 3, Myra said, her voice taking on that edge that always made everyone's skin crawl. We go full tilt, guns blazing, and pray we find a soft spot before they turn us into human kebabs. The silence that followed was less a pause and more a communal prayer for divine intervention. Everyone glanced at Zed, their reluctant leader, by what could only be described as the democratic process of last man standing. All right, Zed said, exhaling slowly. Let's keep our heads down and see how the Vexari play this. Maybe they'll do something stupid. Rickon raised an eyebrow. You mean something stupider than us? That's a hell of a bar. They spent the next few hours moving under the radar, sticking to the shadows like bad memories. Vexari patrols swarmed the city, their movements a testament to both precision and a severe lack of humor. It was during one of these tense, silent moments that the inevitable happened. A drone, sleek and ominous like a metal wasp, buzzed into their path. It glowed with a sickly light, a testament to all that was wrong with this warped version of New York. Zed's heart sank as he heard the telltale hum of Vexari tech gearing up. Move, he shouted, the word not even finished before they scattered like leaves in a gale. The chase was on, the rebels darting through the maze-like streets, the oppressive neon light casting eerie shadows. It was a desperate sprint, the kind where you didn't look back because you already knew what you'd see, inevitability with a side of doom. One by one they were cornered, plucked from their escape routes by Vexari soldiers with the persistence of tax collectors. Zed found himself trapped in an alley that seemed to close in around him, more shadows than substance. The soldiers advanced, their eyes like glowing coals in the dark. The fight was brief and brutal, the rebels overpowered despite their best efforts. Zed fought until his muscles screamed and his breath came in ragged gasps, but it was like punching fog. The Vexari were relentless, their stony expressions never wavering. Congratulations, one of the soldiers said in a voice that was all gravel and no soul. You've been upgraded to guest of honor. Zed spat, more blood than defiance. I'm flattered. Do I get a crown? The soldier didn't even blink. Just a cell. As they were herded away, the reality of their situation settled like a noose tightening around their necks. The Vexari had them, and whatever slim chance they'd had of making history seemed to have evaporated like mist in the sun. Hours later, or maybe days, who knew in this place that played with time like a cat with a ball of yarn, they were dumped unceremoniously into a cell that barely deserved the name. It was a room so small and bleak it could make a coffin look cozy by comparison. Rickon sat in the corner, rubbing his wrists where the restraints had bitten into his skin. Well, this isn't exactly the penthouse I had in mind. Celeste gave him a look that could curdle milk. You expected champagne and caviar. I'd settle for a window, Rickon replied, eyeing the featureless walls. Zed leaned against the cold surface, trying to suppress the tide of despair rising in his chest. The rebels who'd been the hope of humanity were now just another set of faces behind bars, a grim reminder of how fragile their rebellion truly was. And then, the door opened. Not with the ominous creak you'd expect from a place like this, but with a slick, mechanical efficiency that was somehow worse. A Vexari entered, tall and imposing, with a demeanor that screamed authority and an outfit that suggested it was bought on the intergalactic version of eBay. "Zedric Cal," the Vexari said, its voice a chilling monotone. "We have a proposition." Zed remained silent, which in his head was the same as flipping the bird. The Vexari continued as if reading from a script. "We offer you freedom in exchange for your cooperation." Zed snorted. "Define cooperation." "Help us dismantle the resistance," it replied with all the warmth of a glacier. "Identify leaders, provide intelligence. You will be rewarded." The room fell silent, the offer hanging in the air like a bad smell. Zed felt every eye on him, their collective judgment weighing more than a guilty conscience. "Let me get this straight," Zed said, stretching the silence like a rubber band. "You want me to sell out my friends for a front row seat in your dystopian paradise?" "More or less," the Vexari replied, as if it had just offered him a cup of coffee. "Well," Zed said, leaning back with a sardonic grin that didn't reach his eyes, "I appreciate the offer, but I'll have to decline. I'm more into this whole fighting for human survival gig." "And what of your survival?" the Vexari pressed, its words like icy daggers. Zed's grin faded. "Better to die on my feet than live on my knees." The Vexari inclined its head as if acknowledging a particularly dull student. "Very well, we shall see how long that resolve lasts." With that, the Vexari left, the door closing with a definitive finality that echoed in the silence. The room was still, the rebels absorbing what had just transpired. It was Celeste who broke the silence, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of their shared despair. "Do you think they have any idea what it means, what we're trying to do?" "No," Jax replied, his voice a low rumble. "And they wouldn't care even if they did. We're just an experiment to them." Rickon sighed, the sound more exhausted than a Monday morning. "So, what now?" "We just sit here and wait for them to pick us off one by one." "No," Zed said, his voice steady but his insides twisting like a gut full of regret. "We find a way out. If we can piss them off this much, we can find a way to do it again." "And how exactly do we do that?" Myra asked, her tone sharper than a Vexari blade. "We improvise," Zed replied, the word a gamble and a lifeline all in one. "We use what they underestimate about us, our stubbornness, our ability to adapt. It's not over until we say it is." "Then we'd better start saying it," Celeste quipped, "because right now we're more waiting for a miracle than creating history." "Then let's make sure the miracle's on our terms," Zed replied, a spark of determination flickering to life amid the ashes of their hope. And so they waited, plotting in whispers, their plans fragile but fierce, fueled by the unyielding spirit that refused to be extinguished. They might have been trapped, captured, and ostensibly defeated, but they were far from broken. In the digital city where time was a liar and reality a trickster, the rebels clung to the only truth they had. As long as they breathed, they had a chance. Even if the Vexari had them backed into a corner, they still had their wits, their will, and their grim resolve. And that, Zed thought with a bitter smile, was more dangerous than any alien tech. As the faux night draped the city in shadows, the conspiratorial murmurs of the trapped rebels wove a tapestry of defiance. They were cornered, yes, but like any good cornered beast, they were ready to bite back with everything they had. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving, it was about living, even if it meant doing something incredibly stupid all over again. Zedric Cal sat back against the frigid metal wall of their cell, trying to ignore the damp chill seeping into his bones. His mind buzzed with the sour taste of their situation, captivity under the Vexari, who probably thought they'd just bagged themselves a bunch of human-shaped guinea pigs. It was the kind of victory that felt less like a triumph and more like a kick in the teeth. Rickon, ever the optimist, piped up from his corner. Well, at least we're in this together. Misery loves company, right? More like misery tolerates company, Jax muttered, scraping at the damp floor with the edge of his boot. I'd trade all this shared suffering for a decent cup of coffee and a newspaper. Myra Vantor leaned against the door, her eyes flicking over the group, assessing. She had that quiet intensity, the kind that made you feel like she could read your thoughts and was only mildly disappointed by them. We can't just sit here and wait for them to make us their next lab experiment, she said, her voice as sharp as a Vexari scalpel. Zed grunted, raking a hand through his hair. Got any bright ideas? Because I'm fresh out of miracle cures and divine interventions. Myra's lips twisted into a grin that was equal parts defiance and gallows humor. We're humans, remember. We're masters of improvisation. I say we pull a Houdini and get out of this mess. We just need to find the right tool. Celeste, who had been silent until now, perked up. She had that look, mischief barely contained by practicality. I might have something that could help, she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Rickon raised an eyebrow. What you've been holding out on us? Got a Swiss Army knife hidden in your sock or something? Better, Celeste replied, reaching into the lining of her jacket, a trick she'd learned specifically for these kinds of situations. She pulled out a small, nondescript device, no bigger than a deck of cards. It was a piece of modified Vexari tech, a risky gambit they'd smuggled in with the kind of cunning that only desperation could fuel. Zed gave her a skeptical look. That thing isn't going to explode, is it? Only if we're lucky, Celeste shot back. I've tweaked it so it should disrupt their surveillance systems, at least temporarily. But it's a one-shot deal, and if it backfires, we might end up as crispy critters. Sounds like a plan, Jax said dryly. What's life without a little risk of spontaneous combustion? Exactly, Celeste said with a wink. Either we escape spectacularly or we go out with a bang. Win-win. All right, Zed said, feeling the stirrings of that reckless hope that had gotten them into more than one scrape. We time it right and use the distraction to get past the guards. Once we're out, we hit their main console and grab whatever intel we can. We need to know what they're planning. Rickon snorted. And here I thought we were just going to ask them nicely. The plan was as threadbare as their clothes, but it was something. And something was all they needed to rekindle that stubborn flame of rebellion. As the minutes ticked by, an eternity of waiting and anxious glances, they whispered their strategy, refining the details, each word a step closer to freedom or at least to a noble attempt. When the moment came, it was Myra who took charge, her voice low and steady, like an anchor in rough seas. Do it, Celeste. Celeste nodded, fingers dancing over the device with the precision of a concert pianist with a penchant for chaos. With a final click, she activated it. There was a tense heartbeat where nothing seemed to happen, then the world shook. The cell lights flickered like they were caught in a disco from hell, and the faint hum of the Vexari systems faltered, replaced by a satisfying crackle of shorting circuits. Alarms blared, a chaotic symphony of panic and opportunity. Showtime, Zed said, pushing off the wall with a new determination. The door swung open, confused guards rushing in only to meet the rebels head-on. The ensuing struggle was a blur of movement and instinct, a rough dance with violence as its lead partner. Zed felt alive, each punch, each dodge, a reminder that he was still fighting, still living. Rickon took a guard down with a swift kick that would have made any martial artist proud, or at least pleasantly surprised. And they said those self-defense classes were a waste of money, he quipped, dodging a retaliatory swing. Less chat, more smack, Jax grunted, grappling with another guard, his movements efficient and brutal. The rebels moved like a single, determined entity, turning desperation into their greatest ally. Myra managed to snag a weapon from a downed guard, her eyes gleaming with a ferocity that was almost tangible. We get to that control room, grab the data, and get the hell out. No detours. Zed nodded, leading the charge, the corridors blurring past them as they raced against time and misfortune. The compound was a labyrinth of cold metal and indifferent architecture, but Celeste's makeshift device had done its job. Surveillance was down, their path momentarily clear. The control room loomed ahead, guarded by a pair of Vexari who looked more surprised than anything else, an expression Zed aimed to change swiftly. They barreled in, the element of surprise their greatest weapon. Within moments the guards were neutralized and the rebels found themselves in the nerve center of the Vexari's operations. "All right, Celeste, do your thing," Zed urged, scanning for any other threats. Celeste moved to the main console, her fingers flying over the controls with the finesse of a hacker on a caffeine high. "Give me a minute." "Okay, I'm in. Downloading whatever I can." This data could tell us what the Vexari are really after, other than making humanity miserable. Rickon kept watch at the door, a perpetual shadow against the flickering lights. "I don't know what's worse, the fact we're doing this or that it's actually working." "Don't jinx it," Jack said, shifting nervously. "Murphy's Law and all that." "Got it," Celeste announced triumphantly, holding up a drive that glimmered with potential salvation. "Now let's get out before we overstay our welcome." With the data secured, they retraced their steps, urgency spurring them on. The alarms were still blaring, a cacophony that covered their escape but also heralded impending doom. They reached the exit, a reinforced door that had seen better days much like them. Myra glanced back, her gaze fierce. "Last one out buys the first round when we're free. Please, like any of us have credits to spare," Rickon quipped, helping Celeste with the door. With a final heave they breached the outer defenses, the city sprawling before them, a digital nightmare wrapped in a neon glow. The Vexari compound was behind them, but their troubles were far from over. Every step was a reminder that they were fugitives, their lives hanging by the thinnest of threads. They ducked into the shadows, the city's chaos enveloping them. The Vexari would be hunting them, but for now they were free, their ragtag group held together by nothing more than defiance and an illogical sense of hope. Zed paused, catching his breath, looking at the faces around him, tired, battered, yet resolute. "We've got the data. Now we need to regroup, figure out our next move. We're not done yet." "We've only just begun," Myra agreed, a fierce light in her eyes. "Think they'll get tired of us eventually?" Rickon asked, wiping a streak of grime from his face. "Just as soon as they run out of human test subjects," Jax replied with a smirk. "Well, they'll have to catch us first," Celeste said, pocketing the drive like a gambler hiding an ace. Together they vanished into the maze-like city, leaving behind a wake of chaos and uncertainty. The Vexari might have underestimated them, thinking humans were weak, easily cowed. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. Humans had a nasty habit of not knowing when to quit. As they moved deeper into the city, Zed felt a spark of hope flicker to life. They'd struck a blow against their captors, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the future wasn't just a bleak horizon. It was a challenge, a dare to survive, and they intended to answer it with everything they had. The digital city loomed around them, a testament to alien control and human defiance. But amid the uncertainty, one truth remained. Their fight was far from over, and as long as they had breath, they'd keep fighting. With a final glance at his ragtag team, Zed felt the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a badge of honor. They were rebels, survivors, humans, and that, he thought with a grim smile, was something the Vexari could never take away. Zedric Cal, a man who once thought he was destined for greatness, or at least a comfortable mediocrity, now found himself leading a ragtag band of rebels against aliens with a penchant for digital entrapment and experimental sadism. As he skulked through the maze-like corridors of the Vexari compound, he couldn't help but wonder if this was what one called irony or just another cosmic joke at his expense. "All right, everyone," he whispered, using his best commander voice, which was essentially his regular voice but with a hint more desperation. "We've got the intel, but now we need to cause enough chaos to make even the Vexari question their life choices." Celeste, her mischievous streak flaring like a solar flare, nodded. "I've got just the thing for that." Remember the device I used to scramble their systems? I've got a backup, slightly more explosive version. Rickon grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he'd be the first one to try surfing on a lava flow. Explosions, unexpected chaos. It's like my birthday but with less cake and more interspecies warfare. Just don't blow us up in the process, Jax muttered, eyeing Celeste with suspicion born from experience. Relax, Celeste said, patting Jax on the back. I haven't accidentally detonated anything in weeks. Very reassuring, Zed said dryly. Let's move. As they crept through the shadows, the compound's sterile corridors seemingly endless, Zed felt the weight of eyes on his back, Vexari surveillance if not worse. The digital city outside was a living nightmare, all neon lights and deceitful pathways, but in here it was the calm before the storm, or the eye of the hurricane if he was feeling more cynical than usual. The control center was their target, the beating heart of the Vexari's digital machinations. If they could disrupt it, they might just give humanity a fighting chance. Or at least serve the Vexari a sizable portion of humble pie. They reached the entrance, 2 guards stationed outside, their expressions as empty as an underfunded space mission. Myra, ever the strategist, took point, signaling to the others. With a silent nod, they moved as one, a dance of violence and desperation. Zed tackled one guard, the impact jarring but satisfying. He felt the crunch of metal against his knuckles, and while it hurt, it was the kind of pain that reminded him he was still kicking, literally. Rickon dispatched the second guard with a swift move that looked almost accidental in its success. Who knew all those action holos would pay off, he chuckled, stepping over the unconscious guard. Less reminiscing, more infiltrating, Myra snapped, already moving to the control room's entrance. Inside, the room was a marvel of alien tech, consoles blinking with unreadable scripts and holograms dancing in eerie patterns. It was impressive, in a we're totally screwed if we get caught kind of way. Zed scanned the room, his mind racing with possibilities. Celeste, get that device ready. Myra, see if you can pull any useful data from their systems. Rickon, Jax, be ready to hold off anyone who decides to crash our party. Celeste moved to the central console, her fingers a blur of activity. The device she produced looked like something slapped together by a mad scientist, which was probably accurate. All right, this should give them a fireworks show to remember. Jax took up position by the door, his expression one of grim determination. Here's hoping we don't get front row seats to our own demise. Myra worked another console, her focus intense. Got something. A list of experiments, human test subjects, their endgame. We need this. Grab whatever you can, Zed ordered, feeling the tension ratchet up another notch. We make our move as soon as Celeste sets this thing off. The minutes ticked by, each second a reminder of how close they were to either victory or annihilation. Zed found himself almost enjoying the rush, the high stakes making him feel more alive than he had in years, or maybe he just had a death wish. Hard to tell. Celeste looked up, a mischievous glint in her eye. And boom! The room trembled as the device activated, sending shockwaves through the compound systems. Lights flickered, alarms screamed, and the holographic displays went haywire. It was chaos, beautiful, terrible chaos. Zed grinned despite himself. All right, let's move. We need to get out before they figure out what's happening. They bolted from the control room, alarms blaring a cacophonous dirge. The corridors were a blur as they raced toward the exit, a mix of elation and fear propelling them forward. Rickon laughed as they ran, the sound almost maniacal. If we get out of this, drinks are on me. Assuming there's anything left to drink, Jax retorted, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The compound shuddered around them as Celeste's handiwork took effect, systems failing, security measures collapsing. It was glorious havoc, and it bought them the time they needed. They reached the outer wall, the city beyond still a digital hellscape, but for now it was their escape route. Zed paused, casting a glance back at the compound, a parting shot of defiance. Let's go, Myra urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. They plunged into the city, the neon lights painting them in harsh colors as they vanished into the labyrinth of simulated reality. The Vexari would be on their heels, but for now, they had gained a sliver of freedom, a momentary reprieve from the madness. As they regrouped in a hidden alcove, adrenaline still coursing through their veins, Zed took a moment to catch his breath. They were battered, bruised, but alive, and they'd managed to strike a blow that would send ripples through the Vexari's plans. Myra leaned against the wall, a rare smile gracing her features. "We did it. We actually did it." "We're not out of the woods yet," Zed cautioned, though he couldn't suppress a grin of his own. But damn if that wasn't something. Rickon flopped down beside them, exhaustion catching up. "I vote we celebrate by not getting killed for at least a few hours." Celeste chuckled, the sound almost musical in the darkness. "Agreed. Let's find somewhere to lay low, figure out our next move." Jax nodded, the ever-present cynicism in his gaze softened by a hint of relief. "As long as it's not another cell, I'm in." They shared a moment of quiet, the weight of their actions settling over them. They'd disrupted the Vexari's control, if only temporarily, and the data they'd secured might just give humanity a fighting chance. Zed looked at the weary, determined faces around him, a sense of camaraderie binding them tighter than any chain. They were rebels, survivors, and in this digital prison they were humanity's last hope. "All right," he said, standing up, feeling the aches in his body but ignoring them. "We regroup, we plan, and when the time's right we hit them again. We're not done." The others nodded, their resolve mirrored in every grim smile and determined glance. They were in this together, and they'd keep fighting, keep surviving, until they'd wrested back their freedom from the Vexari's cold grasp. As they melted back into the shadows, the city's neon glow a constant reminder of their captivity, Zed felt a flicker of hope burn anew. The Vexari might have underestimated them, but they'd soon learn that humans, despite their flaws, had a knack for defying the odds. Even in a world where the stakes were as high as the stars, Zed and his team were ready to rise to the challenge. As the digital city's chaos swirled around them, they moved forward, driven by the irrepressible force of survival and the enduring spirit of rebellion. And somewhere, amid the noise and uncertainty, Zed couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd live to see the punchline of this cosmic joke after all. The holographic city was imploding around them, pixel by pixel. Zedric Cal, feeling more like a beleaguered tour guide than a rebel leader, kept his band of misfits moving through the dissolving matrix of neon confusion. The Vexari compound had been a digital tapestry, one that Zed had thoroughly enjoyed unraveling. "Do you think they'll charge us for the damages?" Rickon asked, his voice dripping with faux innocence as he ducked under a collapsing neon sign. "Only if they can itemize the destruction," Myra replied dryly, eyes fixed on the rapidly disintegrating map on her wrist display. "I'm sure they'll send the bill to Zed anyway. Figures," Zed muttered, leading them down an alleyway where reality flickered like a bad signal. The city around them was breaking down in stages, each glitch a reminder of their impending deadline. "Let's just hope we find the exit before we fall through the cracks." Celeste was at his side, her gaze darting between the chaos and her makeshift device, which she cradled like it was an overactive child. "Good news is," she said with a grin, "our little fireworks show is doing more than just pretty lights. The control center's in full meltdown. Bad news is," Jax added, taking a cautious step around a glitching fire hydrant that spouted pixelated water, "we're still trapped in here with about as much escape route intel as a blindfolded cat in a maze." "Let's keep the feline metaphors to a minimum," Zed said, glancing nervously at their surroundings. Images of buildings flickered in and out, sometimes replaced by digital voids that looked eerily inviting in their nothingness. "I'd like to avoid triggering any virtual animal-themed traps." They pressed on, the city's digital innards unraveling behind them. It wasn't long before they reached a dead end, or rather, a threshold. Before them stood what looked like an ordinary door, incongruously sturdy amidst the digital decay. Myra stepped forward, skepticism etched on her face. This supposed to take us home, or is this where we meet our pixelated maker? Only one way to find out, Rickon said, pushing past and reaching for the handle with a reckless confidence that bordered on suicidal. Wait, Zed started, but it was too late. Rickon yanked the door open. Instead of an ending, they were greeted by a yawning chasm, a swirling vortex of code and color that screamed unsafe in every language known to man, and probably a few known only to the Vexari. Well, that's comforting, Celeste remarked, peering into the digital abyss. All it needs is a welcome to hell doormat and a customer satisfaction survey. Zed peered in after her. Guess we're jumping into the void then. Everybody ready? Define ready, Jax grumbled, peering over the edge. Because if it involves willingly throwing ourselves into a digital blender, then sure, I'm ready. Just like the first time we stormed a Vexari lab, Myra said with a laugh that held no humor, but with less screaming. Hopefully. Zed took a deep breath, one last look at the imploding city behind them, then jumped. The sensation was immediate and disorienting, like being spun in a centrifuge but with extra colors and less bodily fluids. One by one the others followed, their figures twisting in the vortex until they were swallowed by the maelstrom. For a brief moment, Zed felt nothing but falling, his mind trying and failing to make sense of the swirling chaos. Then, with a jarring lurch, he landed hard on solid ground. The real world, if such a thing still existed in Zed's mind, was stark and cold, a sharp contrast to the vibrant deceit of the digital city. He lay on his back, staring up at a sky that was far too real, clouds scudding across it like hurried travelers. As he picked himself up, the others materialized around him, each wearing a similar expression of confused relief. We made it, Myra declared, brushing off dirt with a determination that suggested she was more annoyed by the mess than the near-death experience. We're back, yeah, Rickon said, shaking his head like a dog after a bath. And I didn't even lose my lunch. Miracle. Celeste spun around on her heels, taking in their surroundings. I'm almost disappointed. No welcoming committee, no fanfare. Just Earth, regular old disappointing Earth. Zed chuckled, a sound that was more exhaustion than amusement. I'll take boring over the Vexari any day. Jax groaned as he sat up, looking like a man who'd just crawled out of a grave. I don't know about you all, but I'm in the mood for a very long nap followed by a very strong drink. Let's save the celebrations until we're sure the Vexari haven't followed us through, Myra cautioned, scanning the horizon with a wary gaze. The landscape was as bleak as Zed remembered it, scrubland dotted with the occasional skeletal tree, and beyond that, the silhouette of ruined cities. It felt like home, and that was a depressing thought in itself. As they regrouped, Zed took a moment to let the reality of their situation sink in. They'd escaped the digital snare, struck a blow against their alien overlords, and now they were back with knowledge and hope in equal measure. We did it, Celeste said, clapping Zed on the shoulder. And all it took was repeatedly risking our lives in increasingly stupid ways. Let's not make a habit of it, Zed replied, though there was a note of pride in his voice. They began the trek towards the nearest settlement, a rebel hideout buried deep beneath the earth. As they walked, the weight of their journey settled over them, each step a reminder of the losses they'd suffered and the battles still to come. Think the Vexari will try again? Rickon asked, his tone casual but with an edge that spoke of lingering fear. They didn't seem like the type to quit while they are ahead, Myra said, her voice thoughtful. But we know their game now and we've got the data to prove it. Zed nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. They'd have to regroup, plan their next moves carefully. The Vexari might come for them again, but this time humanity wouldn't be caught off guard. As they neared the entrance to the hideout, Zed paused, turning to face his ragtag band of rebels. They were dirty, tired, and a bit worse for wear, but they were alive, and they were free. Whatever comes next, we face it together, he said, meeting each of their gazes in turn. We've proven we can fight back, and we'll do it again if we have to. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, tired but resolute. They'd come through hell and survived, and they weren't about to let their hard-won freedom slip away. As they descended into the underground complex, Zed felt a flicker of hope take root. The Vexari might have had them trapped, but they'd underestimated humanity's penchant for survival and rebellion. In the dim light of the hideout, Zed found Myra, her usual stoic demeanor softened by a small, weary smile. "We did good, didn't we?" she asked, her voice low. "Yeah," Zed replied, leaning against the rough wall beside her. "We did. And now we've got a chance to set things right." Myra nodded, her gaze steady. "They'll come back, but we'll be ready," Zed chuckled, a sound that held more hope than he'd thought possible. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the others settled in, Zed and Myra stood together, looking out at the bleak landscape that was now their battleground. The fight wasn't over, but they'd given humanity a chance, a sliver of hope in the darkness. And that, Zed thought, was worth every risk, every sacrifice. They'd faced the Vexari and won, if only for a moment. But that moment was enough to fuel their resolve, to remind them of what they were fighting for. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but together they'd find a way to rise above it. For now they were home. And that, Zed realized with a grim smile, was the best punchline of all.